It started with a truck, a beat-up red Ford, barely 16 years old itself, rolling slowly down Buckhorn Road on a cold Tuesday morning in early March. The cargo bed was stacked 6 high with old wooden fruit crates, battered, stained with decades of apple juice and orchard soil, roped down with orange twine. The truck belonged to the Callaway farm. Everyone in Millbrook Hollow, Virginia knew it. What nobody could figure out was where those crates were going. 3 days later, the same truck returned from the Hargrove Orchard on Route 9, another full load. Crates weathered gray, some with broken slats, most stamped with orchard names nobody had used in years. By the end of that first week, nearly 200 old fruit crates were stacked behind the Callaway barn, and 16-year-old Wren Callaway was the one putting them there. She didn't explain herself to anyone, didn't post anything online, didn't mention it at school. She just showed up at orchard after orchard with the same quiet request, "Can I have your old crates?" And most farmers said yes, mostly because they were glad to get rid of them. But the question traveled faster than Wren did. By the second week, Dale Pruitt, who ran the neighboring grain operation and had opinions about everything, leaned over the fence post. "What's your girl doing with all those old crates?" Wren's mother, Donna, smiled. "I honestly couldn't tell you." When someone finally got brave enough to ask Wren directly, she paused, looked at the stacks like she was reading something written on them, and said, "I'm still working it out." That was all she gave them. If you believe quiet determination can turn forgotten things into something extraordinary, subscribe. We share stories like this every week. And drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. This story has already traveled farther than Wren ever expected. What most people in Millbrook Hollow didn't know was that Wren had been planning this for nearly a year. It had started with a conversation. The previous spring, while accompanying her father to the County Agricultural Extension Office, Wren had met Earl Hutchins, a retired orchard grower in his late 70s who'd run apple operations in the Shenandoah Valley for 4 decades. Earl had a habit of talking to anyone who genuinely listened. Most people didn't. Wren did. He explained that wooden fruit crates, the old-style orchard bins, were being retired across the region. Plastic had replaced most of them. Easier to clean, stackable, no splinter risk. But the old wooden ones, built from poplar and pine planks, were thick, heavy, solid in ways that modern plastic trays simply weren't. The problem, Earl said, was the wood itself. Left outdoors, it rotted, and the chemical residues from decades of pesticide use made some old orchard wood unsafe for direct soil contact with food crops. Wren wrote everything down in a small green notebook she kept in her back pocket. "But what if you lined them?" she asked. Earl looked at her for a long moment. "Then you'd have something," he said. She went home and started sketching. By April, Wren had collected over 300 crates from 8 different farms. She spent 2 full weeks sorting them. Methodically, she measured every crate with a carpenter's tape, noted which ones had clean, unbroken joints, which had soft spots, which had been treated with compounds she didn't want anywhere near growing food. The chemically compromised crates she set aside for non-growing uses. The structurally weak ones she broke down for raw lumber. What remained were 187 crates she considered viable. She sanded them, sealed every interior face with food-safe linseed oil, then lined the bases with landscaping fabric, allowing drainage without letting soil contact old wood directly. This preparation alone took 6 weeks. Her best friend, Sadie Wentworth, who'd lived 2 farms over since kindergarten, was the only person allowed near the project during this phase. Even she didn't get a full explanation. "Are these just really fancy planter boxes?" Sadie asked one afternoon, squinting at a stack. Wren smiled without looking up. "Something like that." The first design attempt collapsed in June. Wren had stacked 12 crates into a 2-column structure, intending to grow strawberries vertically. Plants staggered up the height of each column to maximize production in a tight footprint. She'd been inspired by vertical growing concepts in one of Earl's old farming journals, and had spent months modifying the idea for crate dimensions. On a Wednesday afternoon, the structure gave out. The joint connections couldn't handle the weight of wet soil across multiple stacked levels. The lower crates bowed outward. The entire column tipped sideways, scattering soil and strawberry runners across 20 feet of grass. Wren stood there for a long moment. Then she went inside and opened her green notebook to a fresh page. She brought revised sketches to Earl 3 days later. He identified the problems immediately. The load-bearing calculations were off, and she hadn't accounted for how much wood expands when it absorbs moisture. She needed cross-bracing between columns, and she needed to reduce soil depth per crate to cut weight at every level. Light growing mix, Earl said, tapping the sketch. Coconut coir and perlite, holds moisture without the mass. Wren's notebook gained 5 new pages before she left. By August, the rebuilt structures were holding 12 modular columns, each standing 5 crates tall, arranged in a gentle arc along the south-facing wall of the Callaway barn. That placement wasn't accidental. Earl had spent an afternoon teaching Wren about microclimates, the way walls, tree lines, and elevation create small pockets of warmth and wind shelter that can extend a growing season by 2 to 3 weeks in either direction. She had drilled precise planting holes into the sides of every crate at staggered intervals, not just the tops, so that strawberry plants and fall raspberries could push outward from every face of every column. Air flowed freely around each plant, reducing the fungal pressure that commonly devastated dense, ground-level berry plantings. At the base of each column, shallow collection trays caught drainage water. A gravity-fed line made from salvaged drip tape redirected it back to the top of each structure through repurposed rain barrels. A closed-loop irrigation system from nothing but parts that other people had thrown away. Dale Pruitt stood at the fence in August and didn't say anything for a long time. Where'd she learn that? He finally asked Donna. From paying attention, Donna said. The first real harvest came in September. Not enormous, not miraculous, but genuinely real. Dense clusters of seascape strawberries and autumn Britain raspberries from vertical surfaces that, planted flat in traditional rows, would have required nearly 4 times the ground space. Wren calculated her yield per square foot and compared it against standard flat row production data she'd pulled from extension publications. Her system was producing at roughly 3.2 times the density, not from any single magic ingredient, but from compounding advantages that stacked quietly on top of each other. Vertical space use, improved airflow reducing crop disease loss, water recapture cutting irrigation demand by nearly 60%, and microclimate placement stretching her productive season deep into October. She typed the numbers into a clean 1-page summary. Then she called Earl. I wanted to show you something, she said. Earl drove out that Saturday morning. He moved slowly down the arc of crate columns, bending to check joint connections, pressing fingers into soil to test moisture levels, counting plant spacing intervals with his eyes. He didn't speak for 15 minutes. How many crates total? He asked. 187, Wren said. He looked at her steadily. You built all of this from things people threw away. Wren looked at the columns. The crates were already built, she said. I just gave them a second job. Winter brought frost, and new problems Wren hadn't anticipated. Even well-sealed wooden structures had a productive lifespan. After 3 to 5 seasons of moisture cycling, wood degradation would eventually compromise the frames. The system needed a built-in rotation plan, a way to phase out worn crates without disrupting the columns still producing around them. The solution she designed was modular exchange. Individual columns could be deconstructed and rebuilt without disturbing neighboring units. And the retired crates didn't go to waste. Their degraded wood composted cleanly into organic matter that improved the soil beneath the system's footprint. The entire cycle closed on itself. Orchard waste became growing structure. Growing structure became compost. Compost fed the soil. Soil fed the next season's crop. Wren spent January and February documenting the full build process with her high school agriculture teacher, Mr. Delancey, who helped her translate field notes into a proper assembly guide. Soil mix ratios, irrigation schematics, microclimate positioning principles, rotation schedules. She didn't know yet that anyone outside Millbrook Hollow would ever read it. When the County Agricultural Extension hosted its spring field day in April, Wren was invited to present. She hadn't asked to be. Earl had made a call. 43 farmers stood in the Callaway backyard that morning, including Dale Pruitt, who arrived early and stood near the front without saying anything. They watched Wren walk them through the columns, now entering their second productive season, new growth already crowding the planting holes on every face. She explained airflow, drainage, soil weight math, microclimate mapping, and pollinator access. She'd planted a low border of borage and phacelia along the base of each column specifically to draw native bees to a structure that, unlike flat ground rows, kept flowers and fruit at bee height across multiple vertical levels simultaneously. She answered questions for over an hour without notes. 3 farms requested formal consultations before the group broke for lunch. Dale Pruitt waited until almost everyone had left. He walked up to Wren, looked at the columns for a moment, then looked at her. "I owe you an apology," he said. Wren shook her head. "You owe me a truckload of your old crates." He laughed. It was the first time anyone in Millbrook Hollow had heard Dale Pruitt laugh at himself. That summer, Sadie Wentworth helped Wren install 12 new columns at a farm on the north side of the county. By fall, 3 local schools had contacted Wren about educational versions for their garden programs. The county extension office published her assembly guide in its quarterly newsletter. A berry operation in Kentucky reached out about remote consultation. A community garden in Roanoke asked if she could train their volunteers. The old fruit crates, once stacked behind barns waiting to rot, were no longer waste. They were waiting to be useful again. And the quiet girl who had loaded them into a beat-up red Ford on a cold Tuesday morning, the one nobody thought had any plan at all, had built something that nobody in Millbrook Hollow had imagined. A system where nothing was discarded. Everything had a second purpose, and the smallest forgotten things became the foundation of something real. She hadn't done it through speeches. She hadn't done it through noise. She'd done it the way good farming has always worked. By watching, by trying, by failing once and learning twice, by keeping at it through every season that followed. Because she understood, as all patient growers eventually do, that the best harvests are never rushed. As the pioneering soil scientist William Albrecht once wrote, "Soil is the great connector of lives, the source and destination of all." Wren Callaway understood that, not just about soil, but about everything that grows from it, including ideas.